Dream. All right, so Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim and Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, everyone. Inshallah, today we're going to be continuing with Tafseer Surah Al-A'raf, and certainly let's just look into some of the things that we talked about yesterday. And inshallah, just a reminder, we did go over some of the themes in the ayat, whether we're talking about the theme in Surah Al-Shu'ara compared to Surah Al-A'raf. And some of the most important theme, we said that one in Surah Al-Shu'ara and also in Surah Al-A'raf, it basically emphasizes that divine revelation is stronger than political power. Number two, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's presence, it's basically what removes fear. And certainly, number three, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala basically lets us know that the experts, or at least those that have the ilm, they recognize the truth when it appears. And certainly, number four, faith liberates people from fear, which is why Prophet Musa alayhi salam, when he was told that they're about to catch them, he said, "Kalla inna ma'iya Rabbi sayahdin." And the key center within Surah Al-Shu'ara is to give comfort, to give support basically for the mu'mineen. And that's what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was mentioning, إِنَّ فِي ذَلِكَ لَآيَةً وَمَا كَانَ أَكْثَرُهُم مُؤْمِنِينَ وَإِنَّ رَبَّكَ لَهُوَ الْعَزِيزُ الرَّحِيمُ, basically numerous times in Surah Al-A'raf, Surah Al-Shu'ara. In Surah Al-A'raf, on the other hand, the purpose was basically to show us that how Bani Israel were relating with the message. And certainly, of course, we find that very many times in Surah Al-Baqarah, and it would be an interesting study to see the theme in the story of Prophet Musa alayhi salam in Surah Al-Baqarah compared to Surah Al-Shu'ara, compared to Surah Taha, compared to Surah Al-Naml, and so forth, or Surah Al-Qasas, sorry. The struggle against arrogance, that's the first theme in Surah Al-A'raf, and certainly condemning arrogance, condemning from the very beginning, whether we're speaking about a paradigm, a pattern, whether from Shaitan himself, and then certainly al-mala throughout the stories. And certainly Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is letting us see the pattern that certainly the al-mala, the disbelievers, may stand in a certain way in opposition to truth, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala lets us know that they will be getting the warnings, they will be getting the reminder, but then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will later give, after all the warnings, basically the punishment if they still insist on going against the revelation slash hidayat al-irshad, and the structure, the principle, which is hidayat al-tawfiq. We also talked about that physical liberation does not guarantee spiritual reform, and we basically had mentioned that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does mention Bani Israel very often, and certainly wasn't endorsing them. It was actually exposing how, despite all that support that they had received at one point, and plus had miracles happen before their eyes, but then instead of worshiping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, actually turned away to worshiping once. It was that calf, and another time it was Baal, it was just different stations in their society, how they basically separated from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And certainly, we also see that in Surah Al-A'raf or in other ayat, when it talks about Bani Israel, it's to show how Shaitan can manipulate these people, and at the end, just because someone is receiving the scripture or having the ilm, that doesn't make the person at all being superior just for the ilm. Ilm is one side, but then the application and certainly applying it into principle is another responsibility, is definitely another level of accountability, and certainly it is another level of work that the person must apply it, and it's not just a piece of information that you know on the inside. So it is definitely a warning to later religious communities to recognize that there's a difference between having the ilm and between applying it. That doesn't mean do not have the ilm, but it means you have to basically put in the effort, and let's call it the spiritual relationship. And we're speaking about the submission, we're speaking about religious integrity, we're speaking about taqwa, to basically put it into practice. So that was basically the summary of what we did yesterday. We went in lots of details. Today, inshallah, we're going to be going a little different. Hopefully, we can learn some things on what to find, and we wanted to go to Tafseer al-Qurtubi to make sure that we understand the ayat in a thorough way, and not just a general tafsir. So all of those 2 days, basically, we were doing, let's look into it really quick. So we started out with ثم بعثنا من بعدهم موسى بآياتنا, and then we left off, let's see, what is, right there. I think this is where we left off. No, we left off at right there. وجاوزنا ببني إسرائيل البحر. We basically stopped at the sea right there. So that's actually 1 page, 2 page, 3 pages. So we're looking at almost 3 and something pages that we had been doing all along and away from Tafsir al-Qurtubi. So we pretty much zoomed out, gave a surface tafsir, and tried to put those ayat and the story in coherence to make sure that we don't go way out and then get into these small fragments without seeing the bigger picture. So that was the bigger picture. Now let's go deeper into these fragments, or at least these excerpts, and see what al-Qurtubi had to say about that. ثم بعثنا, and of course, when you see ثم, that actually lets us know that there was a time lapse. Whenever you see ثم, you would know it's either a time lapse or it's an order that has some form of separation. So just keep that one in mind. Not always is ثم related to chronology. Sometimes ثم can also relate to at least some separation, somewhat of a distance in the transition, etc. So we're talking about a form of letting us know that there was either a time lapse or there's a situation in that lapse. In other words, there's a separation. It's not immediate, and certainly not instant. ثم بعثنا من بعدهم موسى بآياتنا. Then later, we had, the word is بعثنا. Let's see what word they use for that in the translation, because بعثنا actually means to resurrect. So why were they even resurrected? No, sometimes ba'athna can mean to resurrect, and sometimes ba'athna can actually mean to send. Okay, so keep that one in mind. Sometimes ba'athna can mean to resurrect, and sometimes it can mean to send. Okay, so what I'm gonna do, we're going to basically right there see the tafsir and see what they had done, and see what they had actually translated certain words, just so that we can, I guess, learn furthermore about what words and how they basically use certain words to describe their certain ayat or certain interpretations, and compare it with what al-Qurtubi had to say. So here we go. So he said, here we go. ثم بعثنا من بعدهم موسى. Then after them we sent Musa. Let's see this one. Then we sent after them Musa, or Moses. Then after them we sent. So all of them use the words we sent, And let's see what al-Qurtubi wanted to say about the word sent in order to see the comparison. So here, al-Qurtubi did not actually say anything about that, did he? So he said, ثم بعثنا من بعدهم. Al-Qurtubi more emphasized on, okay, who is this pronoun referring to? And he's saying that it was referring to after Prophet Nuh, after Prophet Hud, after Prophet Salih, after Prophet Lut, etc. And that was Musa. And he said it was Musa ibn Imran. Musa ibn Imran is basically Prophet Musa, the prophet that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had sent to Bani Israel. بآياتنا. So didn't really comment on the word ba'athna, but in general, is ba'athna to mean as to send? Is it appropriate? Yes, you can use that. And certainly in this context, it does not mean to resurrect, because in this context, we would know that there was no death. There isn't a death in order to say, okay, this means resurrect, but this would basically mean that he was sent. So what's the difference between arsala and ba'atha? Okay, when you say ba'atha, it may give an inference that there was this time lapse between the two, that there was a time lapse where as if the revelation itself had died out in people. That's one thing that you can understand. And then therefore, Prophet Musa alayhi salam was coming in to bring the light and life of revelation back. That's one thing that we can understand. Number two, when you say ba'athna and arsala, arsala usually comes with a specific risala, usually comes with a specific message. But ba'atha could also give me that inference that he was sent, not necessarily with a specific message, but he was sent for perhaps maybe a different reason that may be more detailed than just a message. الرسالة and arsala is usually more exclusive to a message, a note that was sent. So when you say بعثنا من بعدهم موسى بآياتنا, is it because this was letting us know that as if revelation had died out in the hearts of people, and then Prophet Musa alayhi salam was coming in to bring light to it, bring in the revival? Is that the case? Or is this just to say that there was more than just a message that Prophet Musa alayhi salam was sent with? Okay, بآياتنا, he was sent بآياتنا, so perhaps maybe, hey, بعثنا بآياتنا, maybe this is to let us know that there was a lot more than just a message, but there were messages, there were signs, there were miracles that Prophet Musa alayhi salam had come with. إلى فرعون, and certainly here al-Qurtubi said بآياتنا to mean بمعجزاتنا, meaning with the miracles, so that they had come. Now, one thing is to mention is that the word بآياتنا is a plural of ayat. The singular is ayah. Okay, the singular is ayah. Ayah can mean just a sign, and ayah can mean just a verse, and ayah can mean just an indication of something. So we're talking about an indication, we're talking about a sign, we're also talking about miracles as well, can sometimes be in the Quran referred to as an ayah as well. So when you look at the word ayah and surah, okay, if we're using it in the Quranic term, what's the difference between ayah and surah? An ayah can mean a miracle. So every single verse in the Quran is actually a miracle. The translation as a verse is actually, I guess, the best translation that you can use, but it still doesn't give the accurate meaning of what the word ayah really refers to. Ayah means it is a verse. Ayah can also mean, and mainly means, that it's a miracle, and also can mean that it's a sign. Okay, so an ayah can mean a sign, can mean a verse, can also mean a miracle. Okay, surah is basically coming from the root sa wa ra, which means a high wall. Okay, so this is looking at a high wall. So what about the surah in the Quran? The translation to a chapter is actually the best out there, but it still does not give the accurate meaning of what the word surah means. Because the word surah in Lugha Arabiya actually means the highest point of something. So you're looking at a high point, you're looking at something that acts as a transition and a protection. That's what a sur is. And surah is to tell you that there's a high point. You know, think of all the 114 surahs in the Quran, that each one is basically like a lighthouse. So think of it as a high point in the Quran, like a lighthouse right there that's giving you all that area to bring about that clarification. So think of it as a high minaret, think of it as a lighthouse, think of it as a high spot, and that's what surah is. It doesn't, when you look at high spot, you definitely cannot translate it as a chapter, because a chapter is more of a partition in a book. Okay, but a surah in Lugha Arabiya does not mean a partition in a book. It actually means a high point in a place. So a high point in a place, what high point are we talking about? We're talking about every single chapter or every single surah is basically a high point that includes a number of different signs, a number of different miracles that basically lead to the way in helping you find guidance. Now, certainly, when you look at the word Quran, I know we're taking you out a little bit because of the word ayah. The word Quran, on the other hand, basically comes from the root qara'a, which means to recite. To recite, basically, that something is given to you as a recited scripture, a revelation for you to basically read. And to read in Lugha Arabiya, qara'a, basically means that you are deciphering certain words and basically reading. Now, the other thing is that the Quran itself does actually have multiple meanings in the Quran itself. It is Al-Furqan, it is Al-Kitab. So you could see Al-Furqan to actually go to the root fa-ra-qa. The root fa-ra-qa actually means to put distinction to something, to bring a distinctive clarification. So we're talking about Al-Furqan to bring a distinctive clarification between falsehood and truth. Another word, al-kitab. But the word al-kitab just means a plain book which contains all the different papers. But we can see even in Quran called Ahl al-Kitab, referring to al-Kitab to the Gospels, referring to al-Kitab to the Torah, and even the different books or the different, at least, interpretations that even whether we're speaking about Jews or whether we're speaking about other nations, just like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had talked about that Prophet Ibrahim had kutub Ibrahim wa Musa. So we're looking at what is this talking about, a special book. It doesn't have to be just a book that contains many papers. It can be a kitab, can also refer to just any message or any note that you are basically sending to someone that is distant, someone that is basically needing your communication. So it's a form of communication. All right, so when you look at here, بِآيَاتِنَا, I know we kind of got into the Quran to understand it because the word ayah, but here in this context, بِآيَاتِنَا is to basically say that Prophet Musa alayhi salam had come with all the different the scripture, 2, the miracles, 3, the different signs that basically prove and support the message that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had sent with Prophet Musa alayhi salam. إِلَى فِرْعَوْنَ وَمَلَئِهِ فَظَلَمُوا بِهَا. And certainly, فَظَلَمُوا بِهَا, it can mean just the word ظَلَمَ means to transgress the limit. which is basically saying that there was a certain limit that the person had trespassed, and this limit is basically assigned by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And certainly these people had transgressed many limits. But why did it say just فَظَلَمُوا, but why biha? Meaning that the signs themselves, and biha is referring to the ayat. So what did they do? Well, they rejected the ayat. So therefore, by that rejection, they were considered as transgressing the limits. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, semicolon right there, فَانظُرْ كَيْفَ كَانَ عَاقِبَةُ الْمُفْسِدِينَ. And certainly when you look at the cause of dhulm is going to bring about the basically the effect right there. And see, now I want you to look at the word fandur. Fandur actually means to see. So when you say to see something, am I supposed to be seeing something when I'm not even present? Seeing something may be used in a form of a literal seeing with your naked eye, and could also mean to recognize a certain pattern. So when you see something, you can see something that is visualize something, or you can see something visually with your naked eye and actually see it right there. So certainly, فَانظُرْ كَيْفَ كَانَ عَاقِبَةُ الْمُفْسِدِينَ. This is in order for us to visualize. And we know that visualizing can be a form of dhikr, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, and see the trajectory. When you look at aqiba, what is al-aqiba? We mentioned before that the root is aqiba, and al-aqib can mean anything that is behind something, anything that is in the back, or it may also mean the heel. So when we're looking at the back or the heel, meaning the ending of something. And the ending meaning certainly they lived a certain life. Now you came later. And what we want you to see is focus on how the ending basically happened. What happened at the end? And here's a question. Should we focus on what happened at the end, or should we look at what happened in the beginning? Number one is that we look at the end as in relationship to understanding the beginning. So what does that mean? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is letting us know that in order to know whether these people were successful or not, you don't necessarily look at the beginning all the time, but you have to see where this is going. This is wisdom. This is wisdom. And that's why it's always very important to take the elders' inspiration, the elders' experience, because they're coming to you from the future, from your future, to actually tell you what went wrong, what they had already experimented, what they had already done. And then they're telling you, فَانظُرْ كَيْفَ كَانَ الْعَاقِبَةِ. They're actually telling you, hey, I want you to look at the ending. That way, you will realize before you hit that ending, that will basically be a tragic ending, and you will probably discover that you wasted your life all these times, and probably wasted potentials, and probably wasted money. The ending is one way to think in and see and basically investigate in a wise way before you even hit it. Before you hit that solid rock, you definitely need to see. And certainly Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is teaching us how to think in a wise way, how to look at the ending of something before you get to it, in order to avoid definitely a very tragic ending or a very tragic consequence for what you might not be able, may not be able to shift your path, or shift, maybe it would be too late. So therefore Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is letting us know, before you take the wrong route, and before you get carried away with all the rhetoric, and before you get carried away with all that self-manipulation, that this is going to lead you to happiness, etc., recognize and see how other nations, they fell under the same rhetoric with the mala, they fell under the same manipulation, under the same delusion, and they certainly thought that everything was working out. So be careful from making the same and getting to the same path, or be careful from going the same direction. So when you look at فانظر كيف كان عاقبة المفسدين, I think it's very important. That's one thing that we definitely need to teach our teenagers many times, to understand how to create this wise thinking by looking beyond their limited time. Don't look now. Look 10 years from now. Where's this going? Look 20 years from now. Where are you going? You may dislike right now that you're probably redoing classes, or probably needing to maybe needing to do certain work, or needing to put in this type of homework, or whatever it is, but that's actually going to save you in your future, and certainly going to give you a lot of help. Okay. وقال موسى يا فرعون إني رسول من رب العالمين. You can see al-Qurtubi right there laid out basically a number of different ayat right there. So we're looking at from ayah 104 to 112, and just wanted to, I guess he felt that that was, a group of ayat, even though I'm sure Ibn Kathir would not necessarily just limit it to that. But let's see what he says. So, وقال موسى, Musa عليه السلام told فرعون, يا فرعون, إني رسول من رب العالمين. That was the first announcement. Now he's letting him know that he was a prophet of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and not any prophet, but a prophet from the Lord of the worlds. I want you to look at the word رب العالمين, and he did say إله العالمين. So what's the difference? رب العالمين, when you look at, well, certainly الرب is also الإله, but as Muslims, we would believe both. But Rabb actually is giving us an inference that he's the one that is sheltering, that is taking care of, that is preserving everything, etc. So when you say preserving everything, because the Pharaoh himself was deceiving the masses, that they were basically needing to worship the Pharaoh in order to get all the privileges. So then Musa alayhi salam tells him, well, I'm actually coming to you as a prophet from the true Lord, that is giving basically shelter, that is giving security, that is giving the rizq, the provision, and the list goes on, and that is for all the people, for all the different nations, for all the different creatures, for every single world. And therefore, to recognize that's a way to tell that Pharaoh that your claim on the spot is something that I do not believe in, and that you, Fir'aun, are not not a Rabb, and certainly is only limiting yourself within one particular region, one particular area. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is basically the magnificent Lord. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the Lord of all the worlds, and that's basically limiting Fir'aun on the spot right there, to say you don't have not control, not over yourself, and certainly not over the people at all. Certainly this king, or Fir'aun, he does recognize the implication of that, but then Prophet Musa alayhi salam, he comes in to say حقيق على ألا أقول على الله إلا الحق. When you say حقيق, the word حقيق actually certainly just when you say حقيقي, okay, so this is to say it is incumbent upon me, that is right here, Prophet Musa alayhi salam. So we're taking this whole sentence together. It is incumbent upon me, or حقيق على ألا أقول could also mean that it is an obligation. It is something that is not only incumbent, but it is certainly something that I will take as complete and full, with full integrity, to deliver in truth. So when you say حقيق على ألا أقول على الله إلا الحق, so you could see the word al-haq and haqiq to basically say that I am committed to the ultimate truth and I will speak nothing but the truth. That's basically what it means. And that's basically the highest level of confirmation and of affirmation to say that I'm coming to you with the complete truth, with the ultimate truth, and I am fully committed to basically speaking and delivering the truth delivering the truth despite all the different opposition out there. That's why when you look at the word haqiq, that's basically to let him know that there is no going back, that there's no hesitation, that there's complete determination. And we see that, if we were to look at the psychology of Prophet Musa alayhi salam, you can see Prophet Musa alayhi salam, number one is that he is part of ulul azmi min al-rusul, and there are five ulul azmi min al-rusul, and what that means is that there are five prophets that were considered as probably the prophets that had faced the most objection, that had faced the biggest challenges, and had put in probably the highest level of determination. We're talking about Prophet Nuh, we're talking about Prophet Ibrahim, we're talking about Prophet Musa, we're talking about Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, we're talking about Prophet Isa alayhi salam. Those are the five prophets that are considered as ulul azm min al-rusul. And when you talk about ulul azm, you're talking about a certain high level of determination. Okay, let's see. And when you look at ala alla aqul at the end, he was giving us a different qira'ah, and I thought it would be a good idea to tell you again about this website. Really good website, and you could see it right there. Absolutely love this website, especially that I'm not specialized in qira'at. So I would go to this website, and you can go for qira'at right there, and they give you, let's say, right there, you can get those qira'at right there. And if, let's say, you had one particular surah you wanted to actually look at its ayat, and here we go. He'll basically give you all those different qira'at. Maybe I can make this one bigger. So here's Surah Al-A'raf, and then he'll go in details with all the different qira'at for Surah Al-A'raf. So we are in what ayah right there? Let's look at it in order to see how this works. So we are in ayah 105. Let's see how this is going to work. Okay, so we're going to go to ayah 105, and he'll tell you which ayah, so the ayah that basically
Aisha, you're breaking up. You have to check the.
Okay. So let's see. Oh no, my laptop is freezing.
Internet issue. You have to check it, Dr. Aisha.
Okay, here we go. Now it's moving. Okay, and oh dear, my laptop just froze. So let's give it a chance. Okay. Oh dear, my website is really for recording at the same time. But anyhow, let's see if we can get to that. Okay, it's job. So let's see if we can probably close, because my laptop is not going good or something, but it's not allowing me to. Just called the. Am I breaking too? Oh dear, maybe that's why it's. Hmm. Yeah, I don't know what's happening. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to reboot and hopefully that will, oh, it even died. Okay, so inshallah, you can hear me now. I'm hoping that you can. So here we go. I hope you can see it. Okay, so please do tell me if you can hear me and if things are going good. Okay. Leave and come. Okay. Is it working better now?
Yes, for me,
Yes.
I can hear you. Yes.
Okay, good. So when we look at this page, I absolutely love it because, like I said, it was giving me a very beautiful foundation. And the beautiful thing about it is that it would even give you the different reciters as well. So we're gonna look at a 100 and what was that, 3 or 4? Hold on, let's look into it. What ayah number was that? Hold on, that was, let's see, that was ayah. حقيق على الأقول. So that was ayah 105. Let's look at 105. And those are all the ayat that had differences of qira'at basically in Surah Al-A'raf. So let's see right there. And here's the good thing. Let's look at it. So it would give me حقيق على ألا أقول, gives me all the different qira'at right there. And plus you can even hear it.
حقيق على ألا أقول على الله إلا الحق قد جئتكم ببينة من ربكم فأرسل معي بني إسرائيل.
So, of course, this is Abdul Rashid Sufi, and what he was doing is basically reciting based on Is-Susi an Abi Amr, and you could see they will give you that indication where the variant qira'ah actually appears in. So if you were to look at all of that, you can hear all those qira'at and you can hear all the variants right there in a way that is really easy for you to hear it from experts. But is there a difference in the meaning? Let's look at this one. This one's rather, you can see a lot of different قراءات. Let's see, or at least variants in this one.
حقيق على ألا أقول على الله إلا الحق قد جئتكم ببينة من ربكم فأرسل معي بني إسرائيل.
Okay, that's quite interesting. جئتكم is what he was doing. Let's see this one. This is Ibn Jamaz. Okay.
حقيق على ألا أقول على الله إلا الحق قد جئتكم ببينة من ربكم فأرسل معي بني إسرائيل.
So wasn't that the same? Okay. So anyhow, I just wanted you to see this one. We're going to come back to it because there's going to be a one ayah that we definitely need to see the different variants and how they would read it. But at the end, does it actually matter? Does it make a difference in the meaning? Sometimes a variant in qira'ah may give a different meaning, may give additional meaning, certainly not contradictory, but can give me an additional meaning, can give me more details, probably, and giving me certain variant in qira'ah. Why were there anyways variant qira'at? Variant qira'at because when you look at Lugha Arabiya, it was basically spoken by different tribes. So the Prophet ﷺ did basically get the revelation that is also coming in with certain tribes, or at least certain variant ways to read the words, and not always do they have a difference in meaning. Some of those variant qira'at are basically suiting a particular way that certain tribes or other tribes were saying the words, but it most of the times gives me the exact same meaning. Okay, but I personally would love to get the 10 qira'at and would love to actually learn more about it, even though it doesn't really always affect the meanings. But at the end, hey, what blessings is there than knowing what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had revealed onto the Prophet ﷺ, even in different ways. At the end, it's Quran. Okay, let's see. He basically also said right there, حقيق, meaning محقوق, meaning that it is incumbent, it is imperative. And let's see, what was he saying? قد جئتكم and of course in the other قراءة قد جئتكم ببينة من ربكم. What is البينة? Well, البينة is from the root bana. Bana actually means to bring a clarity to something. So when you say bi-bayina, it basically means I'm coming in, and the letter ba can mean with and can mean other different meanings, almost 13 different meanings. But to make the story short, that he's basically saying I am coming with. So that's why you would say the translations basically using the word with right there. Just, when you see the other translations, they will say I'm truly the messenger of the Lord of the world, etc. And then basically saying coming with. So here we go. And he said, indeed, I have come to you with clear proof. Where is that with, and where is that word with? Where did they get it from? They basically got it just from the letter ba. Just from the letter ba. Look at how intricate Lugha Arabiya is. Just the letter ba is equivalent. This little ba, let's get it right there. Just this little ba actually means with. And the word bayyina, you could see they translated it as clear evidence. They gave clear proof. Okay, let's say when you look at clear proof, clear evidence, etc., why did they translate it as clear proof? Why did it need two words as to translate basically the word bayina? Because the word bana means to bring about clarity to something. Now, when you say bayina, then you basically add this shadda right there. When you see this shadda right there, this can mean one, something that is repeated, something that is basically like a hyperbole, exaggerated, and it could also mean something that is basically showing a repetition. Oh, what we just said, repeated, or hyperbole to mean exaggerated, and could also mean that this is to basically show a certain repetition right there, in a certain what is the word, series. Okay, so when you look at the word bana, but you have the ya, and because you can't put a shadda on the alif, so what do you flip it into? You flip it into a ya, and it becomes bayyina. to basically give me the adjective, the adverb, and basically the noun of it. So it becomes bayyina to mean that this is a clarity and this is a clarification that basically comes with a series. One, because the shadda gives me series, the shadda also gives me that hyperbole, but this isn't a hyperbole like in English. In English, that would basically mean something is exaggerated and away from the reality of what it is. In Lugha Arabiya, no, not always is a word of hyperbole or a word of exaggeration necessarily supposed to reflect that something is away from reality. Sometimes it is to express the magnificence or express basically the magnificence of something, or how great something is. So this is just a note right there. So when you look at bayyina, we're speaking about how great these ayat are. We're speaking about how detailed those verses or those clarifications are. And certainly it is coming from the Lord Almighty. It is coming by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, sending this truth in a way to basically help them see الحق as what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wanted to give them. فأرسل معي بني إسرائيل. So therefore, send with me Bani Israel. Why did he say فأرسل معي? Why did he want to take Bani Israel from the beginning? It was supposed to be one to let them go on the mission. There was a particular mission that they were supposed to carry. That's the first thing. There was a particular mission they were supposed to carry. Number two is that it was also that they were supposed to be the ones to continue the legacy of the prophets. Which prophets? The prophets that they were basically the offspring of. Prophet Yaqub, Prophet Ishaq, etc. But did they take that legacy into what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wanted them and expected them to do? The answer is definitely no. فَأَرْسِلْ مَعِيَ بَنِي إِسْرَائِيل قَالَ إِن كُنْتَ. Let's see right there. أَرْسِلْ مَعِيَ بَنِي إِسْرَائِيل, he said خَلِّهِمْ, meaning that I want you to give them the freedom basically to leave. And certainly he, that is the Pharaoh, was basically using them for all the hard work. So he was basically using them as nothing but laborers. And certainly here he said, وَكَانَ يَسْتَعْمِلُهُمْ فِي الْأَعْمَالِ الشَّاقَّةِ, that he was using them for all hard labor, basically. All right, let's see right there. And فَأَلْقَى عَصَاهُ. Let's see here. بينت فأرسل معي بني إسرائيل قال إن كنت جئت بآية فأت بها إن كنت من الصادقين. Then, of course, قال, that is, he had said, if you had come with a verse, then come and bring it forth if you truly are from the honest ones, from the ones that were truly the true messengers. And in other words, if you really are committed to what you are saying. Okay, so here we go. Let's see. قال إن كنت جئت بآية, if you had come with truth, فأت بها. Why did I translate the word بآية, if you had come with truth? But let's see what translations they had for us in terms of فأت بآية. The Pharaoh said, if you have come with a sign, then bring it if what you say is true. Let's see. If you have come with a sign, they said. Let's see this one. If you have come with a sign, if indeed you had come with a sign. So they all translated the word ayah as a sign and not necessarily a revelation and not necessarily as a miracle, but certainly because later he was going to bring the miracle. But it can also mean a revelation as well. If you had come with a revelation, if you had come with a scripture or something that you claim, because he had said that he was the messenger of the Lord of the worlds. So in that situation, he was going to investigate, and he said, do you have a miracle? Do you have evidence to basically support your claim? And if you do, then bring it forth if you truly are a trustworthy one. فَأَلْقَى عَصَاهُ. Now, that helps us also wonder whether the word sign was actually accurate. Why? Because فَأَلْقَى عَصَاهُ lets us know that he had thrown his rod, his stick, his staff, and it became basically a thuban. Why do I want to go back and re-examine the word ayah? I want to go back to it because if I were to tell you, did you call them? And you say, or did you call him? And you say, yeah, I left him a message. That means you and I understand who we're talking about. You and I understand by using the word, the pronoun him, and you said left him a message. That means you know who I'm talking about. Now, same thing. By looking at the response, you would understand that based on the response, what exactly did he understand that Fir'aun was looking for? Fir'aun was looking for a supporting evidence that he was truly a prophet of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Fir'aun was looking for certain details. Fir'aun was looking for anything to basically support and confirm Prophet Musa alayhi salam's words and what he had said when he said حقيق على ألا أقول على الله إلا الحق. How do you prove that you are only going to be saying the truth? So here I would have to re-examine, and when he said قال إن كنت جئت بآية فأت بها. So then you can see the inference is that the Pharaoh did hear that there was some miracle that he was presenting, did hear that there was some evidence that he was presenting. Did he necessarily care about the evidence? Did he necessarily care about the miracle? Well, we know later on that he wasn't concerned about the evidence as much as he was concerned about how to twist such evidence and how to work in dismantling such evidence in order to maintain his power. Now, having that being said, when you look at فَأَلْقَى عَصَاهُ فَإِذَا هِيَ ثُعْبَانٌ, from Prophet Musa alayhi salam's response, we know that the word ayah is not necessarily just a sign, but it is actually supporting evidence. It can also be a miracle. And certainly that's what he was looking for. The Pharaoh was looking for miracles. The Pharaoh was looking for a way. What is he, let's say, demonstrating outside? Because when he says, قَالَ إِن كُنْتَ جِئْتَ بِآيَةٍ, if you had come with a verse, if you had come with miracles, if you had come with supporting evidence, then demonstrate it to me. If you were truly honest and if you were truly trustworthy with what you had just claimed. But certainly when you see فَأَلْقَى عَصَاهُ فَإِذَا هِيَ ثُعْبَانٌ مُبِينٌ, he had thrown. When you say the word alqa, he didn't say rama. Alqa, he just put it down and it knew what it needed to do. Why? Because when you look at that cane, you look at a staff or you look at a rod, and later that turns into a thu'ban or a snake, basically. In that situation, of course, this isn't something that they can deny, because this rod can no way be confused with something else. And then when it became a snake, it was obvious that it was a real snake because it was moving, because it was basically taking certain steps, and it was basically doing, well, not certain steps per se, but at least approaching, going back. It was behaving in a certain way that it really had shown and had given the expression that it was a real live thing, and that this isn't some form of a delusion. وَنَزَعَ يَدَهُ فَإِذَا هِيَ بَيْضَاءُ لِلنَّاظِرِينَ. And then Musa alayhi salam certainly took his hand out of his collar. let's see right there what other words they would use. And he drew out his hand, thereupon it was white, with radiance for the observers. And he drew out his hand, and behold, and drew out. They all said drew out. One of them said out of his collar. So the question is, what do the Mufassirin actually say in regards to the area that he was taking his hand out? So we know naza'a actually means to take out his hand, and once he would take out his hand, so here we go, semicolon, فَإِذَا هِيَ بَيْضَاءُ لِلنَّاظِرِينَ. It would be in ultimate whiteness to everyone that can observe this. Okay, was it white to mean skin complexion, or what type of whiteness are we talking about? Now, one thing is that in Lugha Arabiya, the word abyad can actually mean white, just white. But at the same time, the word abyad can also be describing something that is light. Okay, something that is light, because if something is dark, it is black. So they would use the word abyad to mean something is illuminating, something is radiating, something is apparent, and therefore it is white and not dark. Now we know that Prophet Musa alayhi salam was actually dark skinned. After all, he was living in Egypt. Egypt at the time was predominantly dark, and maybe of course we know in Africa there are different shades of different complexions, and the further up you go into the north, the shade basically lessens and lessens, the more south until, well, not the very south, but of course then you go into the middle part of the region of the continent of Africa, then it gets really dark. And certainly regardless of that, we already know that Prophet Musa alayhi salam was dark-skinned and not light-skinned. Number one, for the hadith, the Prophet ﷺ did describe Prophet Musa alayhi salam that he was very similar to the tribe that was known to be dark-skinned, and in fact he had given the example of his dark skin basically as Shanu'a, as the tribe of Shanu'a. And they were known to being dark-skinned, and certainly that's to let us know that he was dark. And the Prophet ﷺ, in fact, in Sahih al-Bukhari, the Prophet ﷺ did describe him, and he said, رَأَيْتُ لَيْلَةَ أُسْرِيَ بِيَ مُوسَى رَجُلًا آدَمَ طوالا جعدا كأنه من رجال شنوءة. That's how he described him. That is the Prophet ﷺ describing Prophet Musa alayhi salam. Let's look into this hadith for a bit. Let's see. He said, this is the hadith. I had seen during the night when I was ascended to basically the heavens, Musa, as a man that was Adam. When you say Adam, this isn't talking about Prophet Adam. This is talking about meaning that he was dark-skinned. طوالا, he was tall, and ja'da, coarse hair. So now we're looking at a completely African feature. كأنه من رجال شنوءة, as if he was from the tribe of Shanu'a. So the tribe of Shanu'a, it was a tribe that pretty much looked very Ethiopian. وَرَأَيْتُ عِيسَى رَجُلًا مَرْبُوعًا. And I had seen Isa, Prophet Isa alayhi salam, not very tall, not very short, and he was مَرْبُوعَ الْخَلْقِ إِلَى الْحُمْرَةِ. And of course, Prophet Isa alayhi salam, that he was the complexion, he was not called, he didn't call him Adam to actually mean dark, but he called him that he was light-skinned, but his face was more closer to red. But this isn't red. This is talking about pinkish color, or what today in English we might actually call it tan. So and the Arab would use it as a tan color. And by the way, Caucasian complexion, the Arab would call them asfar. They would call them pale. Okay, they didn't like it. The Arab did not like the white color, what we consider today as Caucasian white color. They called it pale. So they called, they had different ways of describing color. So when you look at when he says that he was ma'il ila al-humra, this doesn't mean he was red complexion, but this actually means he was tanned. So it's not too black, even though if you were to look at the region where Prophet Musa was and when Prophet Isa was, which is you're talking about Palestine versus Egypt, very close in regions, but certainly ancestry and all of that. And you could see he was also white. So that's what we mean by tan. Okay, let's see. I'm not going to go in details with that one, but at least so that we understand when it relates to Prophet Musa alayhi salam and the color that he basically came out with, which is فَإِذَا هِيَ بَيْضَاءُ لِلنَّاظِرِينَ. Let's see. نَزَعَ يَدَهُ. He said it means that he took it out and basically exposed it. And where did he get it out of? Where was it and where did he get it out of? And you could see some scholars actually said جيبه أو جناحه. What's the difference between a jayb and a janah? Al-jayb is not a pocket. At the time, the pocket was more in the bosoms. So he was basically as if he was tucking his hand inside his vest and then bringing it out. The other interpretation, they said il-janah. Il-janah would more be under the armpit and it would come out white. And we know in Surah Al-Nahl that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was making it even clearer. And he said, وَأَدْخِلْ يَدَكَ فِي جَيْبِكَ تَخْرُجْ بَيْضَاءَ مِنْ غَيْرِ سُوءٍ. And tuck your hand or insert your hand inside your jayb. Al-jayb would more be in the vest, basically in the sleeve, or is it in the sleeve or is it in the vest, meaning in the collar area? So that's where when you saw that interpretation and out of his collar, he didn't go far because there are some scholars that said that because there's a supporting ayah for that the collar area is al-jayb. So that's why when you look at the ayah in Surah Al-Ahzab, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had also mentioned that women need to cover their juyub. This isn't talking about, making sure that your pockets are closed. No. This is talking about the bosom area because it was seen as attractive at the time, just like today, to open up a certain level in order to show the breast area as basically it brings attraction. And certainly the ayah was making it clear that such area in a woman's basically body is also part of the awra and must be covered. So when we look at the jayb, we can see that even the Sahabiyat and even the Prophet ﷺ had explained to them that the area of jayb or the area that must be covered is basically that area that is within the collar. So that translation is not far, but he basically got it from another ayah. So let's continue right there. And when it says min ghayri su', where do we see min ghayri su' in this ayah? No, we don't see min ghayri su' in this ayah, but we do see it in Surah Al-Nahl when it says min ghayri su'. What is min ghayri su'? Min ghayri su' meaning not due to a disease, because we know that the pigmentation can basically, as a result of a disease, the pigmentation can change, and this person, whether dark-skinned or light-skinned, the pigmentation can basically lose the different colors, whether we're speaking about what is that melanin, is it melanin? They can use the melanin and then become white, and certainly that would actually be a disease if that happens. It's basically a malfunction in that body to basically have this kind of whiteness. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was emphasizing that this was min ghayri su'. This was not as a result of an illness, but it was basically something that will come back to its normal color. But then Prophet Musa alayhi salam would show them that here's basically the light radiating right in my hand, right there for you to see it. And certainly he said, وَكَانَ مُوسَى أَسْمَرْ شَدِيدُ السُّمْرَةِ. شَدِيد السُّمْرَةِ, meaning that he was black and in fact very dark-skinned. Very dark-skinned. And speaking of dark skin, we do have a number of Sahaba that were actually dark-skinned. So we're looking at Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, we're looking at Bilal ibn Rabah. Bilal ibn Rabah wasn't necessarily very dark-skinned. Bilal ibn Rabah was part Arab and part Ethiopian. And certainly we basically do see that a lot of the Ethiopians were brought in as a, part of the slave trade. But just keep in mind, slavery was not based on color, just like Suhaib al-Rumi. Suhaib al-Rumi, although based on his ancestry, it wasn't necessarily Rumi to mean European. In terms of ancestry, he was actually kidnapped from Iraq. Okay, so he was looking like an average Iraqi boy, all right? But he was taken as a slave because he was kidnapped as a young boy from an Iraq area and then basically taken to Rum, Bilad al-Rum, which basically at the time was Syria, was Jordan, was Palestine, which is basically their kingdom. And then he was taken as a slave. But then Abdullah ibn Jad'an, who was not Muslim, but he basically had a habit of buying slaves and freeing them, especially younger boys. And Suhaib al-Rumi happens to be one of the lucky people that was freed by Abdullah ibn Jad'an, and yet this is just an example that it doesn't have to be, slavery was not necessarily based on color. All right, okay, let's continue right there. ثم أعاد يده إلى جيبه فعادت إلى لونها الأول. So then he basically puts his hand back and it would return. So once he takes it out, they're able to see it. Now you see it. Now you see how this is basically something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is giving me support to show you the light, to show you the whiteness, etc. And of course, let's see Ibn Abbas. And he said, كان ليده نور ساطع يضيء ما بين السماء والأرض. Where did he get that from? What is he saying? That his hand would have this light that would radiate in between the heavens and the earth. Let's see right there. Where did he get that from? He said, ذكره الرازي في تفسيره, and which basically is a piece of information. When he says ذكره الرازي, even though, hey, he gave us a reference, but that's not an enough reference to look into this athar in order to verify it. Just because al-Razi had mentioned this quote, that's not enough for me to verify it. But, well, that's why, sometimes knowing how to read the books of tafsir and knowing how to see which information is verified or not is very important, because you don't want to be just reading and considering that, yeah, there's something that was mentioned in that book and therefore I'm going to take it and therefore, hey, for sure it's verified. Not necessarily. Okay, let's see the other interpretations. They said that it was basically coming out as white as snow. And then when he puts it back, it basically becomes the same color as the rest of his body, meaning dark complexion. And now he gave me Tafseer al-Tabari wal-Muharrar al-Wajiz. Now here's one thing. Tafseer al-Tabari is a very important resource. And so is al-Muharrar al-Wajiz. I would have a problem with al-Razi, but I wouldn't have the same problem with al-Tabari and al-Muharrar al-Wajiz. Why? Because al-Razi is that tafsir, although it's huge, it's almost in 25 volumes, it is huge. But al-Razi has a habit in his tafsir where he may, one, put information that is not verified. Two, can sometimes put his own opinion, and a lot of that personal opinion comes from the time that basically was very common within his area. So we're looking at we're looking at a lot of Greek influence from the Greek philosophy, a lot of influences from the time that and what culture was basically what was in the culture and what was happening around and etc. And definitely, even when it comes to the aqidah, he basically considered that you can use your own intellect, you can use your own intelligence, you can use your own way of interpretation in a very materialistic interpretation, and ended up very often going out of what the text is saying because he considered that our mind is enough to understand scripture and our mind is enough to basically make, let's call it as an interpretation that is not necessarily dependent on what. Yet when Tafsir al-Tabari, you look into his tafsir, it's basically called التفسير بالمأثور. What is it, tafsir بالمأثور? So al-Tabari, what he wanted to do, he didn't want to just put out the interpretation right there. No, he wanted to make sure that he has the supporting evidence, the supporting interpretations that that basically are supported by Sahaba, supported by Ahadith, and certainly supported by all the different evidence out there to make sure that he's not making up his own tafsir, but it actually goes back to a certain reference. So when you look at Tafsir bil-Ma'thur, that is Tafsir al-Tabari, you're actually talking about a tafsir that is all about referencing, that is all about validating, that is in search of valid interpretations. And certainly that's to him was more important than putting in different interpretations that may sound logical or may sound interesting, but he was concerned about, I need verified, and I need to verify all the interpretations and basically put out and lay out all those different ahadith or athar. What's the difference between hadith and athar? Al-hadith is what was narrated and attributed to the Prophet ﷺ, right? So the Prophet ﷺ either said it or had done it or approved it, or it's basically a report on the Prophet ﷺ. Al-athar is basically something that a sahabi had said, right? A sahabi or a tabi'i had said. Sahaba, the companions, or the second generation, okay? But not something that the Prophet ﷺ had said. So Tabari will say, you know what? I'm going to use those references as my key lens to understand the Quran, which is why Tafsir al-Tabari is probably the most important tafsir. And Tabari died 310 Hijriya. The Prophet ﷺ died 11-year Hijriya. So you're looking at almost 300 years difference. And certainly when you compare it to Razi, for example, you're talking about a different era, you're talking about a different society, you're talking about a completely different attempt. In Muharrar al-Wajiz, although died in the 5th century Hijrah, but still he was actually going to Tabari as his key reference. So the interpretation was that his hand would basically come out white as snow. And okay, come out white as snow, فَإِذَا هِيَ بَيْضَاءُ لِلنَّاظِرِينَ, in order to tell us that he had two key miracles. قال, at least in the beginning, قال الملأ من قوم فرعون إن هذا لساحر عليم. And certainly the people that were part of Fir'aun, that supported Fir'aun, they said that he is clearly a magician. So when you say clearly a magician, what did they actually want to say? Even, well, if you don't believe in magic, then you, in that situation, you would think of it what? What is magic? How do we understand magic? So why did they accuse him of doing magic? They accused him of doing magic to basically say that he is not supported by Allah, but he's supported by shaitan. So they did recognize that this is supernatural. That's the foundation. That's the key thing. They did recognize that it was supernatural. But then they wanted to attribute it now that it is not coming from a good source, but that it was actually coming from an evil source. That's why they called it sihr. But wait a minute, the question is, anyways, the Pharaoh does depend on magic. So why would he think that accusing Prophet Musa alayhi salam of committing magic is a bad thing? Certainly, Fir'aun did want to say that magic is okay to use to support certain things, but he wanted to claim that the magic that he was doing, or at least the magic that he was seeking, that he was using it for good purposes. But then for Prophet Musa alayhi salam, he wanted to accuse him of doing magic that one, it's actually a supernatural thing, but it is coming from an evil source. And therefore, it's going to bring in harm. At least that's what he wanted the masses to believe. Why? Because he wanted to protect his own government. He wanted to protect the system that was definitely coming in to bring him a lot of favors. But here's the question. We know that sihr, and when we speak of magic, we speak of sihr and all of that, a couple of questions come about. Was this magic something that in general, when we look at magic, is magic supposed to be a trick? Or is magic more than just a trick? So in other words, is there such a thing as an evil spell or a magic spell in Islam? I know it's off topic, but I know that everybody is always just wondering about magic. And certainly we know the story, but I thought it would be a fair thing to do to actually go and speak about magic for a bit in order for us to understand really what it is. One of the most important books about magic is basically this one, all right? And which basically says all the different rulings that relate to magic. So I'm not going to get into that. You could say it's a big book. I'm not going to go in all of that, but I'm just going to answer some of the questions in regards to magic. So does magic actually exist? How do we understand magic? Let's see right there. And definitely we needed to further investigate. So I thought it would be a good idea to go to this article really quick. And certainly Islam takes magic seriously and certainly had forbid using and learning magic in all its forms because magic is seen based on the Quran as nothing but evil, and that it is not something that is intended to be used for any good purposes ever. So what is magic anyways? All magic is always to be only used for bringing evil, and certainly to do the real magic that would actually mean that the person needs to disobey, and in order to get that supporting power from a shayateen, they would have to engage in disbelief. They would have to engage in certain forms of disobeying Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, certainly, when we look at this piece of it, that takes us into, okay, so when you say magic, in order to understand it, we know that in magic, in Lugha Arabiya, it basically means to turn something away from what it is. Certainly, scholars, just a note, Scholars actually had differences of opinions on the definition of magic. So what exactly is magic that is haram? Is it that, I put a coin and probably stick it to my sleeve, and then I show you that there's nothing in my hand, and then probably, flip my hand up and then probably push something in my sleeve, down to my sleeve, whatever it is, and let this coin basically pop up, and you're saying, wow, you didn't even know how I put this coin, but you know that, hey, there's no way that I basically had made a coin out of the blue like that, or out of nowhere. But of course, is this necessarily the magic that they were talking about? So that's what we're going to be talking about. What kind of magic? What is magic? How do we understand magic? What is haram and what is halal in magic? So there, scholars, like I said, had differences of opinions on what really is magic. Some of the scholars, like al-Hanbali, were making it, at least I would say to a certain level, exclusive to magic spells. Magic spells would include certain words that the person will say, which was basically taught by the shayateen and by other magicians, perhaps, on how to call out onto the demons in order to let the demons basically do in the favor of whatever this person, that is the magician, is asking for. So you're seeing also that there would be a magic spell that would harm the person that probably is not even nearby, whether they put a doll and insert doll in that doll some stitches, or probably knives, or probably pins, or whatever, and write certain things. So they're harming the heart, they're harming the body, and probably even going farther to getting the body sick, or probably even killed. And it can go really far to separating between a husband and a wife, or probably even go farther to affecting the other person. Remember what I said about it, Razi? He was more into logic and all of that. He didn't actually believe in any of that. He didn't believe that there was such a thing that can affect a body from a distance, no matter what toy you say, no matter what magic spell. He didn't believe in any of that. He considered that that is not logical, and that sihr is basically a different sneaky way, or a different way that it make the people basically imagine. In other words, it's an optical illusion right there, and then therefore the person will not necessarily know how this was done, and it becomes just a way of making a trick. Now, here's one thing. You could see these are two different things. One is calling it, well, it's just a trick that the other person doesn't know how to do. And the first one was actually saying that no, there is basically an effect that jinn, or the outside world, let's just use that one, that is influencing, affecting the person without even touching the person. So two different things. One is calling it that it was nothing but a trick, and the other one was calling it that it was, no, it's not a trick, and that it has the ability to really harm and even be fatal. Now, here's one thing. Looking at these two definitions, especially that sihr, it's not something that I can prove to you. And a lot of this is actually based on experience. In order to really believe that it was really something that is nothing but a magic spell, how am I going to prove this? When this, anyways, is not within the laws of physics that your brain was designed to understand, investigate, and scrutinize. Your brain was designed to study physics, study chemistry, biology, all these things, and recognize basically how to understand all of that. That's what we can experiment. But in order to say that there are different influences that I cannot experiment using physics and biology and chemistry, that would actually mean that I am saying that there is an outside world that I'm not capable of investigating, and it surely is not part of matter in motion. Do I have any evidence? Do they have any evidence? Well, when you look at all the different ayat that relate to magic, you will see that even the ahadith, they were rather sort of ambiguous in giving me a clear definition of what it is. In fact, both parties, the ones that said it's nothing but a trick, there's no such thing as a magic spell and such, the other group of scholars that said, no, there is such a thing as a magic spell. There is such a thing that you can have a person sitting down, they can run all the blood tests, all those different tests as what we know in medicine, and then they'll say, well, there's absolutely nothing wrong with this person. And even if you were to do maybe other tests, can they necessarily get at least some form of let's say treatment? Let's say the doctors say, well, yeah, this person got cancer and we're going to treat the cancer. Is it possible that maybe that the cancer is getting, how did this person get cancer from the beginning? Maybe that the cancer is going even worse. How do we understand all of that? Is there such a thing as that? So when you look at that, is that you would say that magic is, according to some scholars, is actually two kinds. So the first opinion, they said, certainly there are certain magic spells and there are certain words that one can read, that is the magician, and it's used in order to call out on the demons, and the intention is to bring harm onto the person that is being targeted. And the ayah says, وَمَا هُمْ بِضَارِّينَ بِهِ مِنْ أَحَدٍ إِلَّا بِإِذْنِ اللَّهِ. Now, the other scholars, they disagreed with that. And they said, وَمَا هُمْ بِضَارِّينَ بِهِ مِنْ أَحَدٍ إِلَّا بِإِذْنِ اللَّهِ. Sorry is not an evidence. They wanted to be very logical and said there's no such thing as reading or having some form of these magic spell words and then probably harming the body. They said that there's no such thing. Yes, I believe in magic according to them, but we believe that that was nothing but a manipulation, nothing but a trick, and not a spell. Let's see the other interpretation is that there are basically certain chemical things, certain medications, etc. It may harm the person, may harm their mind, may harm their will, or may even harm their own desire. And then it may completely alternate and certainly change this person and change this person in what this person basically feels about the world around him, or probably even control these people's wills, and that it would affect a person's body by making certain areas weaker until this person dies. So we're talking about maybe putting something in the food, and this person becomes basically this person becomes losing their their blood pressure, and certainly maybe affecting them in that way. And certainly certain medications, certain herbs, certain chemical things may actually affect the person, and definitely even affect a person's mind. They can start going into hallucinations, start getting some form of psychosis, etc. And then those scholars, they basically said, well, this is as a result of the medication or the herb or the poison that was inserted, and not necessarily as a result of this remote thing that was done far away, and that the jinn would recognize the person, etc. Now, here's one thing. We already know Islamically that this is a form of shirk, because the scholars that considered it as a form of shirk, they considered that that is to be done only by a shayateen. They're the ones that do it. This person, in order to get the shayateen to do what he is asking them for, basically being under their service, that is the shayateen. He would have to worship them, and he would have to get closer to them in order to basically request how to affect that person that was the target. The other interpretation that basically said that no, it's a form of manipulation because Islam is extremely strict on truth. And they said to play these magical tricks is a form of transgression and going out of principle. And if the person did use some form of poison, some form of substance to affect anybody and to bring in harm, then in that situation, this person is held accountable for it. And certainly it would be, well, both sides actually agreed that it is a major sin and that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had considered it as something that is punishable and by the government, the Muslim government, and also punishable by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on Judgment Day. Okay, now here's one thing, is that the most important ayah that we have is this ayah. واتبعوا ما تتلو الشياطين على ملك سليمان وما كفر سليمان ولكن الشياطين كفروا يعلمون الناس السحر. What does this ayah actually say? And they followed what the shayateen were reciting on basically in the kingdom of Prophet Sulaiman. Sulaiman did not commit kufr, that is Prophet Sulaiman, but that is a response to the Yahud that said that Prophet Sulaiman was actually a disbeliever. And the response was saying, وَمَا كَفَرَ Sulaiman. Sulaiman was not a kafir, and yet الشياطين were teaching the people basically how to do magic. And certainly, if you were to continue this ayah, they would it would emphasize that they were basically doing magic to affect the relationship between the couple. So what we understand from this ayah is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had called it kufr when he said وَمَا كَفَرَ سُلَيْمَانَ. Prophet Sulaiman alayhi salam was not a kafir, that is the inference, as because anybody that engages in sihr, it is impossible for a person to engage in sihr and magic unless they basically reach out to the shayateen. Let's see the other part of this ayah. وَمَا أُنزِلَ عَلَى الْمَلَكَيْنِ ببابل هاروت وماروت وما يعلمان من أحد حتى يقولا إنما نحن فتنة فلا تكفر. You can see that Babylon, or certainly that kingdom of Babel, it was a kingdom in Iraq, and they were such experts in magic that certainly Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had to basically send angels to show them the real tricks and what they were actually doing in order to tell them, do not do it this way. It's exactly if I were to tell you, hey, if you were to leave grape juice outside, it will ferment. Once it ferments, it means it contains some level of alcohol. Do not drink it. Okay? And then you start using it. Thanks for the idea. Let me bring that grape juice, let it ferment, and then drink it in order to basically make alcohol. But what they were teaching them is how to basically not do magic, and that this way of doing things is basically not permissible. Now, having that being said, when we look at magic, how do we understand the different kinds of magic, and how do we understand all those different forms? Number one is that you could say they all agreed that it can bring harm, and that the key intention for all magicians is that they basically wanted to bring in harm. And what does that look like? Now, before I get into that, the Prophet ﷺ was actually, according to the hadith in Sahih al-Bukhari, let's see that hadith for a second. The Prophet ﷺ himself actually went got pricked by magic. He had a magic spell. And let's see right there the hadith when the Prophet ﷺ, let's see right there, I'm going to show you this hadith in order for you to see it. What was that hadith saying? That the Prophet ﷺ suhr, the Prophet ﷺ himself had actually been under a magic spell at one point. You could see this hadith is in Bukhari and Muslim. Number one is that he had certain symptoms. One, he would think that he was basically being intimate with his wives when in reality he wasn't. And Sufyan had mentioned that this is mainly what happens when a person is under a magic spell. They might go in a form of a delusion, or just become delusional at times. Let's see. So Sayyida Aisha said, when Sufyan basically asked, did you know what he had said? So she said that the Prophet ﷺ had said, أعلمت أن الله قد أفتاني فيما استفتيته فيه أتاني رجلان فقعد أحدهما عند رأسي والآخر عند رجلي. So what was it? The Prophet ﷺ did recognize that something was not right in his body, that something was off. So he tells his Sayyida Aisha that he reached out to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to ask what was he feeling, what was happening. Something is not right. Basically, so two men come to him. Two men come to him. Those are actually angels in the form of two men. One stands near his head and the other stands near his legs or near his feet. And then one of them says, what is wrong with this man? The other one responds, he is matboob. He basically has a magic spell. And then the other one said, and who made this magic spell? And he said, لبيد بن الأعصم رجل من بني زريق حليف ليهود كان منافقا. Basically, the Prophet ﷺ was hearing these two men, which are angels, basically locating who had done this magic spell and what is actually happening to him. And number three, where this was. So it was this man, his name is Labid ibn al-A'sam or Labid ibn A'sam. All right. And he was from the tribe of Bani Zurayq, a tribe of Bani Zurayq, and those were basically a tribe that was one of the Jewish alliances, and he was basically a munafiq. He was an ally to the Jews, and he was pretending to be Muslim, and the question was, they said, wafima, what did they use to bring in this magic spell? And it was fi mushtin wa mushata. Mushtin wa mushata, pieces of hair from the Prophet's hair. And where was it? It was also including juffi tal'atin dhakar. What is juffi tal'atin dhakar? It was using the pollen basically from a male palm tree. And it was basically thrown in Bi'r Dharwan. It was an abandoned well, and that's where it was thrown. And then the Prophet ﷺ, here in this hadith, فَأَتَى النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم البئر حتى استخرجه, that the Prophet ﷺ himself had actually taken it out. But in another narration is that he basically had sent a group of Sahaba to go to that particular area and grab this magic, this magic piece, and then read on it. What are they going to read on it? And she said, وَكَأَنَّ مَاءَهَا نُقَاعَةُ الْحِنَّةِ. What does that mean? She said, I had seen it, and we could see that it was put in some kind of utensil, and you could see that the water of it, like the water that it was put in, is if it was so red that it was exactly like henna. Just like henna, just like Mendy. It was so dark, it was so red, it was so disgusting. And it was كأن نخلها رؤوس الشياطين. said it was looking like it had spikes, basically, like the spikes of a shaitan. Did she ever see shaitan? No, she didn't, but that's how they wanted to describe it, that it was looking so evil, it was looking so disgusting, that it had these spikes that looked like shayateen right there, because you can see that she was recognizing that there was a magic spell, and that's how it was done. So the Prophet ﷺ later the Prophet ﷺ had the other basically malaika, and they had done that ruqya on the Prophet ﷺ. Okay, now let's go back to those to that page that we were just working on just earlier. What are the different kinds of magic? Number one, when we say different kinds of magic, this isn't to say that this is exclusive to these, but we're just letting you all know what different types of magic can look like. Number one is that for us to know that the magic probably during the time of Prophet Musa alayhi salam may have been different than the magic that was during the time of people of Harut and Marut. And perhaps even during the time of the Prophet ﷺ, the magic is probably different. Let's first look at the different types of magic. The first kind of magic is reaching out basically to the stars. So we're talking about something similar to the horoscopes, and they would reach out basically just like the people of the city of Babylon. They would reach out to the sky. So it's looking at the horoscopes and then looking at that, and they'll be using that as a way to either tell the personality, hey, you're a Scorpion, this is your personality, you are that horoscope or whatever it is, and looking at that and then saying, okay, this is going to tell me the personality, this is going to tell me your future, this is going to tell me what's happening, this is what to expect for the day, etc. That's a form of magic. And certainly they used to think that this was something that would affect their life. This was something that is true. And they had certain things that they would relate to. So they had specific clothing, they had specific maybe incense that they would use around it. At the end of the day, is that certainly this was a form of magic. So they would use that. Number two, and some of that belief in regards to the horoscopes, or probably the planets and how they relate to us, they would also use some form of hidden words. So they would have certain names for certain I guess, meteorites or certain stars or certain planets, etc. And then they would say, well, if I were to use certain words, that will have some form of a spell, some form of a spirit, some form of energy that will affect the person and will affect their future. So we're just going to reach out to this energy that is out there, coming out from the skies, coming out from the stars, coming out basically from the different galaxies, and then we can change a person's future using certain words that can affect a person by reaching out to that energy out there. Let's see, the other one is that looking at the different things in the galaxies and when it goes, when it comes, when it sets, etc., thinking that it has some influence on the people and how their life is living, whether we're talking about perhaps maybe if something's going to be expensive, a good day today for business, not good today for business, or whatever it is, or probably a calamity happening. Would study also maybe the wind and what's happening, maybe the weather, all of that, in order to expect and use that as a way to tell the future. Does that mean studying wind and studying astronomy is haram? No. Astrology is different than astronomy. Astronomy is using different physics, they're using different calculations in order to study what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had created the world in. Astrology is somehow trying to anticipate by looking at the stars, things in the galaxies, and trying to figure out people's future, trying to figure out a person, their personality, etc. That's ghaib, and certainly no astrology, and certainly no one is capable of knowing ghaib, which basically also includes whether magicians or may include different stars as well. Let's see here. There's another kind which they would look into the different days of the month. So they would look at the different days of the month and then say, okay, what month were you born in? What day of the month? And every single day would basically mean that there's a new expectation of what is actually going to happen to you. If you relate with this person, this is what to expect. You relate with that person. So fortune telling, this is basically fortune telling. Let's see the other things. The other thing is basically using different forms of letters, and every single letter would basically assign to a certain number. These numbers, they would basically believe if they were used in certain ways along with these letters, that they are basically going to be capable in calling out, whether we're speaking about people's names or calling out. In other words, let me explain what the magicians that use this believe. The magicians that use this believe that jinn does not know people by their names. It knows people by their smell. So in order to make a magic spell on you, we could see the Prophet ﷺ, they used his hair and fingernails or anything like that, and they could also use something that has your sweat on it. Your sweat, because jinn identifies you by your sweat. Jinn identifies you by your smell. That's how jinn identifies you. So in order to do a magic spell, jinn does not communicate the way we communicate, but they would use certain letters, certain numbers in order to hint to them based on what they understand. So it's not that they're speaking to you in Arabic or in English, but they would basically have a certain way in communicating with the jinn on what they want them to do. And certainly they would also relate with the timing and so forth in order to affect the jinn to do certain things. And certainly this type of sihr, there's no differences of opinions that it is actually haram. The other kind is that certainly dealing with other forms or other things that are on earth. So we're talking about jinn, we're talking about shayateen, and basically using some form of smoke or some form of saying that there's a specific energy that they're relating to in order to basically have them do them that service in harming people, in affecting people. And certainly the service is not going to be to bring good whatsoever. It is actually to bring evil by harming the other person. There's no such thing as good magic. It's always evil magic, period. Because the jinn himself, when he does magic, he knows that he's not supposed to be relating to humans in the beginning. It is just like you have a fitrah that you do not want to relate to jinn. Jinn as well has a fitrah to not want to relate to you either. So once that jinn is relating to you, they do recognize that they had transgressed the limit. I wonder if I transgressed the limit myself. When was I supposed to finish? 11? Oh, for real? Okay. I'm just going to go really quick, inshallah, right there. So when the other thing is that the different things about magic, we see that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had said, min sharri naffathati fil uqad, as basically one of the things that we're supposed to seek support from and seek refuge in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala from the blowing of the witches. What do? Well, they would blow and then make a certain, well, say a certain word and then make a certain knot and then blow and make a certain knot. And all of that, it was basically a form of magic that was done in order to harm others. Now, certainly, even the Prophet ﷺ was not a witch that had done it. It wasn't a woman, but it was actually Labid ibn al-Asam. It was a man, and he was a Jewish man that was pretending to be Muslim, and he's the one that affected the Prophet ﷺ. Now, here's one thing. Do I have, or do I find, let's say, evidence to support opinion 1 or opinion 2, that magic is not necessarily exclusive to something that is what we consider as logical, and that there's something else? Do I have any evidence? Well, the different verses or the different hadith, I would say, are rather ambiguous, and certainly you can interpret it to both opinions. But what do I regard? I regard that, yes, there is magic, meaning magic spell. And I don't have but the evidence that even the other scholars had used and depended on, which is from the ayat and the hadith. The Prophet ﷺ had went through Sahih, and certainly that ayah وَاتَّبَعُوا مَا تَتْلُو الشَّيَاطِينُ عَلَى مُلْكِ سُلَيْمَانَ, and certainly يُخَيَّلُ إِلَيْهِ مِنْ سِحْرِهِمْ أَنَّهَا تَسْعَى, etc. So definitely, we definitely know that there are two kinds of sihr. But is that type of magic, the kind that we know as a magic spell, like the one in Harry Potter and all of that, is that at all possible? Yes, but it is limited. I believe it is possible. How do I verify that it's possible? There are certain things that really nothing but experience. Can we depend on experience? Is a person that believes that no, there's no such thing as a magic spell and said, I don't think it's logical, I don't believe in it, does that person get out of the fold of Islam? No, that doesn't get them out of the fold of Islam if they don't want to believe it. That's okay. That's a valid opinion. But if a person wanted to believe that, yes, I do believe there are magic spells. I personally believe there are magic spells. And I cannot prove it to you, because if I were capable of proving it to you, I will basically have to bring a logical argument. The logical argument that I can show you is basically in those ayat. But then the other scholars will say, okay, here's a different way of interpreting this. But the only way that I can prove it to you is the way that it proved itself to me. I had many cases that were nowhere to what you can describe as a medical reason, psychological reason, etc. I've had many cases that were not even Muslim. And when I would do ruqya on them, they would behave differently. They would tell me it's burning. And even though there's no way that these people actually know that I'm reading Quran on them. And, or even vomit things like blood, or probably maybe behave in certain ways, or probably speak in certain things. There's no way. Or probably do certain movements that is impossible for anybody to do this kind of movement. You can push up your belly to a certain level, but to push it up to the point as if you were pregnant, 7 months pregnant, I dare you to be able to do such a thing. Or to curve your back in a certain way that's going to break your bones, or to probably jump, or to probably say something, or to respond. I'm talking to you in Arabic, but you don't know Arabic. But all of a sudden, you know what I'm asking, and you know exactly what I'm saying, and you're responding. This is something that all I can tell you is that through experience and through seeing these cases is what made me actually believe it. You can believe it or you can deny it. That's up to you. That's okay. It doesn't get you out of the fold of Islam. But all I can say is do the ruqya all the time. We're going to talk about that later, inshallah. I'm not going to go in details with that, but I wanted to just comment on this one, just different things that they will say right there. What are some of the things symptoms that this person is going through, magic or not? They might say, well, basically all of a sudden hating her husband, no good reason to hate themselves. These couple are getting into these arguments. She's saying that she hates everything about him. There's no good reason. This guy's, let's say, probably just a decent looking, etc., but then she hates everything, or probably getting into some form of delusional or some form of an illness, which of course maybe they don't have the gene for it, or maybe there's no reason to why they would get sick, but all of a sudden this person got really sick, and even the scientist or even the doctors are not able to figure out, etc., or even a form of extreme love that this person, all of a sudden they just feel so attached to this person. And you can see that they had laid out some certain symptoms that they cannot be away from them, etc. But all of this, there's really no reference to it other than just an experiment. So just wanted to note that one. Things that a lot of what was written, like right here, he was talking about Ibn Qayyim al-Jawziyya, that he was writing in his book Rawdat al-Muhibbin, and he was talking about a story, all of that. I cannot use that as an evidence to verify whether magic is right or not. I do see it in certain books, yes. I cannot verify it to you, even if you were to ask me, just because I'm telling you, hey, I've had a case like that. It's okay. You can deny it and you can say, I'm sorry, I don't believe it. That's absolutely fine. But I'm just letting you know at least some of what was written in some of the Islamic literature, and letting us know that there is something that, based on what they had seen, that it basically is referencing to a certain magic spell. And certainly they'll tell you these stories. And do you have to believe in these stories that this person becomes really lazy, this person's hearing sounds, or what is called psychosis, etc.? We cannot verify it logically, because anyways, this is part of what we would call a supernatural. So I'm not going to be able to prove to you using some kind of a blood test or using some kind of a footage of something to prove to you, say, look, this person's actually dealing with magic, and this person went through this and this. At the end of the day, is that we just have certain interpretations that tell us that this is possible, and that through experience and experiment and through ruqya, we manage to heal certain people. Is it, you want to say it's a psychological thing, kind of like a placebo? Maybe. But you would first have to explain to me, how was this person capable of doing certain body movements when it was impossible, or even understand certain things, or even, here it is, I had a Hindu girl come to me and she wanted me to do ruqya. And when I would speak in just gibberish, and then I would first I would, just speak in anything and just see her reaction, and then read ayat from Surah al-Falaq or Surah al-Nas or Surah al-Safat, and then they would scream that they feel something is burning, or they would hear sounds, or etc. How did this Hindu person that doesn't even speak Arabic actually know that I'm actually reading Quran? How did she know where? And you would see patterns. And these aren't people that are not educated, by the way. No, some of them are very educated, PhDs, okay? Very educated in different fields, okay? And so to expect that they're just traditional people coming from some nomadic area, I'll tell you that there are many people that are educated that actually had come to my office, and I did ruqya, and I have a whole video just talking about sihr, so you can check it out, and talking about magic. But I'm just going to say that certainly a lot of this is based on experiment and a lot of it is based on experience, okay? And certainly we basically do have references from different scholars even using it, whether Surah Al-Safat or whether it's in Surah Yunus or just different ayat, and actually getting to treatment or getting to an improvement, and certainly certain things that were mentioned as ways to help with the treatment. One, eating 7 tamarat ajwa, basically a specific kind of dates, and then basically 7 dates during that day, or probably using cupping as a way, or probably using waraq al-sidr. When you look at waraq al-sidr, we're talking about a specific kind. I think I showed you that before. And waraq al-sidr, this is it. Well, this is bay leaves. No, this isn't. This is bay leaves. This isn't it. This is waraq al-sidr. Okay, and then basically dry it. You're going to basically then basically grind it, and then you're going to drink it. So this is one thing, and or drink it in 3 different sips, basically, and or even wash with it, and just using different methods. So if somebody has a method, okay, the Prophet ﷺ said, لا بأس بالرقى ما لم يكن فيها شرك. As long as it doesn't have shirk, that's okay to use based on this generalized hadith. I do have a whole video just about magic. You can check it out. That goes in further details, but this was just a short thing. Okay, it's not really long, but I know that people, when they hear about magic, they have a lot of questions. So I thought it would be fair, because I promised you to talk about magic a little bit. So I wanted to show you some of the things that probably might answer some of your questions about magic. We still didn't finish Tafsir al-Qurtubi, at least in this regards, but if there are any questions, inshallah, we'll be capable of answering. Go ahead, my friends. You can unmute yourselves. No one wants, okay. What I'll do is that I will, let's see, right there.